December 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Holt, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. Kropf.
Here.
Mr. Kropf represents the Powhatan District. Mr. O'Connor, who is an at-large member and is chair this year, could not be with us this evening. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is vice chair to the commission this year. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county. Sitting to my left is Ms. Liz Parman, our Deputy County Attorney. It's my pleasure to serve as Secretary to the Commission. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Paul. My first comment was thank you very much for coming out this evening on this 81st anniversary of Pearl Harbor today. And I was just telling some of my colleagues here that my mother was going to church on that day in Honolulu and she's still alive.
Wow.
So the first item on our agenda is public comment, which are topics not subject to a public hearing for tonight. Do we have any cards, speaker cards? All right, so I have opened and closed the public comment. The next item on our agenda is reports of the commissions. Ms. Null from DRC.
Mr. Chairman, the Development Review Committee met at approximately 4:20 on November 16th, 2022. Committee members present were me, Barbara Null, Frank Polster, and Steve Rogers. Staff members present were John Reisinger, Senior Planner, Jose Ribeiro, Senior Landscape Planner, Andrea Case, Community Development Assistant, and Josh Crump, Principal Planner. Committee discussed the conceptual plan C-22-0070 Monticello Avenue Shops for a proposed commercial development located at 4744 Old News Road and 3897 and 3905 Ironbound Road, submitted by Mr. Tim Trant of Kaufman and Knowles on behalf of Verdad Real Estate. The proposal seeks to rezone the property from R8 residential to B1 general business to allow the development of 3 4,000 square foot buildings to be used for offices and retail uses. The committee and the applicant team discussed the site layout, traffic, stormwater treatment, landscaping, and buffering. The committee noted that there should be some harmony with the existing shopping center to preserve the view shed. It was noted that reductions in the depth of the buffer is being requested due to the amount of VDOT right-of-way on the parcels. It was further noted that the buffer would contain the same number of plantings in a smaller footprint. The applicant team stated they would conduct a robust public outreach regarding this project. The applicant assured the committee that the Planning Commission members would be made aware of public meetings so that they could attend if desired. Since the applicant requested to discuss the project and seek input and questions from the committee, no action by the DRC was required.
Thank you, Ms. Null. Mr. Haldeman from the Policy Committee.
Sure. The Policy Committee met on November 10th, 2022 with a quorum present. Also present were several staff members. The committee met to continue its discussion of the Board of Supervisors initiating resolution pertaining to Ordinance 22-0001, amendments for scenic roadway protection. Preservation tools for roadways must be applied uniformly and categorically according to county attorneys. Since this initiative was to focus on community character corridors outside the primary service area, the committee removed Croker Road, which is not a CCC, Community Character Corridor, from consideration. Centerville Road and Colonial Parkway were also removed as they are inside the PSA. The 6 roads therefore remaining in the discussion about scenic protection are Forge Road, Old Stage Road, Richmond Road, Monticello Avenue outside the PSA, I should also say Richmond Road outside the PSA, John Tyler Memorial Highway outside the PSA, and Riverview Road. The committee also removed the word mandatory from clustering as a possible solution to scenic despoliation because the new 1:20 zoning density in A1 and the proposed buffering and setbacks will prevent new residents from impacting scenic vistas. Voluntary clustering remains under consideration. The committee then considered staff's recommendation to increase setback requirements within the A1 zoning district, applying them only to those parcels adjacent to scenic roadways located outside the PSA. The recommendation was to apply a 400-foot setback to open agricultural community character corridors, exempting shallow parcels. There are a few parcels larger than 25 acres along Forge Road and Old Stage Road, the only two roads for which this setback would apply. Committee members discussed several scenarios and realized that more information about the impact on smaller parcels was needed to make a decision. The committee must also better define what these setbacks are meant to accomplish. Staff will continue its work, and this will be back on the agenda for the January Policy Committee meeting and the Supervisor's January work session. The committee also discussed staff's recommendation to change buffering along wooded community character corridors. Buffering along commercial parcels would be increased from 50 feet to 100 feet. Residential major subdivision parcels would be increased from no buffer to 200 feet, and there would remain no buffer requirements on open agricultural wooded community character corridors where buffers might obscure the scenic vistas. The committee unanimously recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of these three changes to the Board of Supervisors. Finally, the committee accepted staff's recommendation to implement buffering for timbering activities in the A1 district, keeping the 50-foot buffer requirement along wooded community character corridors within the PSA and establishing a new 50-foot buffer requirement outside the PSA, and unanimously recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors. The meeting adjourned at 5:23.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. Any questions for Ms. Knoll or Mr. Haldeman on the reports? Okay, our next item is the consent agenda items, which are deemed non-controversial. However, a planning commissioner can pull an item for further discussion. There's only one item on this evening. It's the minutes of November 2nd, 2022 regular meeting. Do I hear anybody that wants to pull or a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion approved. So the next item is our public hearings, and our first item is AFD 220015, 999 Jolly Pond Road, Cranston Ponds AFD addition. Mr. Reisinger, you have the floor.
Good evening to the Commission. Mr. Hunter Taylor has applied to enroll approximately 169.15 acres of land located at 999 Jolly Pond Road into the Cranston's Pond AFD. The parcel is zoned A1, General Agricultural, and designated rural lands on a 2045 comprehensive plan. The parcel is located within 1 mile of the core of the Cranston's Pond AFD. A single-family dwelling has been constructed on the property. However, the property remains largely undeveloped. A 30-acre portion of the property was timbered this past spring and summer, and a forest management plan has been prepared to guide future timbering activities. At its October 20th, 2022 meeting, the AFD Advisory Committee voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the application. Staff finds that the proposed addition meets state and local requirements for inclusion in the AFD and recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the application to the Board of Supervisors, subject to the proposed conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for staff, and thank you.
Questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Reisinger. So I will now open the public hearing for AFD 22015. Do we have any speaker cards?
We don't, but
Does anybody wish to speak on this item? Hearing none, I close the public hearing and open it up for discussion or a motion from the commissioners.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we accept the JCC AFD 22-0015.
Mr. Holt, we have a motion on the floor.
Mr. Krupp,
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Rose,
Aye.
Ms. Knoll,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers,
Aye.
and Mr. Polstra.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, the next item is SUP 220018, 5477 Mooretown Road, Williamsburg Place Pavilion and Farley Center addition. And welcome, Mr. Lophocker, to your first board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Mr. Greg Stevens and Ms. Samantha Sticchetti have applied for a special use permit on behalf of the Pavilion at Williamsburg Place Incorporated for a special use permit to allow the expansion of the existing psychiatric and rehabilitation facility. The subject property is located at 5477 Mooretown Road, zoned M1 Limited Business Industrial, classified as limited industry on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan, and located inside the primary service area. The proposed expansion to the facility would add 41 inpatient beds, 10 intermediate care beds, and 28 outpatient beds, remove 4 previously approved residential visitor units, and add new office space for staff and expand the indoor and outdoor dining and kitchen facilities. This expansion would result in the facility having a total of 98 inpatient beds, 40 intermediate care beds, and 76 outpatient beds. According to the applicants, the expansion addresses the increasing demand for the need for mental health care and services in the community, in large part to the ongoing effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Williamsburg Place has been an existing business within James City County since 1989, when the board approved the first SUP for the facility, and 4 separate SUPs for further expansion have been approved since. Staff finds this proposal is compatible with surrounding zoning and development and is generally consistent with the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and surrounding zoning. As such, staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application to the Board of Supervisors, subject to the proposed conditions. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time, and the applicant is also available to answer questions.
Questions of staff?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up Mr. Lopacker and welcome to the county and to the county staff. But just to confirm that I had submitted an email, and I'll ask the applicant as well as my my colleagues, but I've requested that landscaping condition 4 at the end of that condition, where it says the let's see, 50% of the trees should be evergreen. I'm just going to insert a request to add, in addition, a majority of the tree, shrub, and ornamental planting, supplemental plantings shall be native species to meet the requirements of Section 24-96 of the county code. Is that acceptable to staff?
Yes, sir. Staff does not see any issues with this particular language change for the
Okay,
case
and I'll run
at
that
hand.
by the applicant when they do their presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Holloman?
I ran into a word I've never seen before, domiciliary. I made an attempt to look it up, and it seems to mean in-home care, but I couldn't understand how it applied to this context. Could you help me with that?
I will defer to the applicant for that
Okay, great.
question.
Oh, wait. What is the square footage of the addition?
The square footage would proposed square footage in total with the expansion would be 82,500 square feet.
And finally, there's 22, pardon me, 22 additional parking spaces. Is that a requirement of code, or do they really need, do they need 22 spaces?
So they are required, or they cannot break the 120% above what is required in the ordinance, and staff calculated that the parking would not break that 120% above the ordinance.
Could it be fewer?
It could be fewer. It is a reduced rate. It's not really considered residential, and so we're using what would be an equivalent to, say, what a nursing home facility might be, with 1 additional space per 4 beds. And really, that tends to take care of mostly a lot of the staff support needs more than anything else. A 1 to 4 is really consistent with how this site has developed previously in all of the other SUP cases, and could be less. Ultimately, should this application be approved, and should the applicant get to the site plan stage, the ordinance does allow for an administrative consideration of fewer spaces based on the specific operation plan and documentation of their needs.
That's where I was going. I drove around it, the campus recently, and there were a decent number of empty parking spaces. Maybe I got there at lunchtime, I don't know. But if they really don't need them, it'd be a shame to break ground if we don't have to. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you.
Are there any?
Are they adding on to the existing building? And if so, where's the addition? It's not shown on here.
Yes, ma'am. So they would be adding on to some of the existing buildings. It's visual, or I know the applicant has prepared a presentation where they'll be pointing out exactly where the building will be expanded.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, before we move on to, thank you very much, Mr. Lopacker. Before we open up the public hearing, are there any disclosures?
Mr. Chairman, I participated in a Zoom meeting with staff on this subject and the applicant on this subject.
Any other disclosures? I was offered an opportunity to, and I didn't see the need for it. And just as a general reminder, if you're going to speak tonight, please tell us your name and your address so that we can get it into the record. And so at this point, I will open the public hearing for SUP 220018. Are there any speaker cards? Does the applicant wish to speak? Please.
Just real quick. Good evening. My name is Samantha Steckety. I'm a senior land use planner with Hunton Andrews Kurth. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, the Pavilion at Williamsburg Place, Inc., which is a subsidiary of Summit BHC. Summit BHC is a national behavioral health provider headquartered in Franklin, Tennessee, and was established to develop and operate a network of leading behavioral and mental health centers throughout the country. Summit's primary focus is on the provisions of psychiatric services and substance use disorder treatments within a flexible and dynamic continuum of care. With the mission to improve the lives it touches, Summit is nationally renowned with 32 locations in 19 states. Summit is particularly proud of its recent launch of the Tactical Recovery Program here locally, which is designed to help our active duty service members and veterans recover from PTSD, mental health, and substance use disorders. Summit acquired the existing psychiatric and rehabilitation facility in 2021 from Diamond Healthcare, and is here before you now proposing a modest expansion in order to accommodate the quickly growing number of people experiencing mental health crises and substance use disorders, particularly since COVID-19. Once implemented, the expansion as detailed by staff will be accommodated within the existing buildings on campus and new building additions. And I'm going to go through each, and the hopefully, if it works, the green will highlight the area we're talking about. The 41 inpatient psychiatric beds will be housed within a new wing being added onto the pavilion, and the remaining beds will be located within the existing building. The 10 intermediate care substance abuse beds will be provided within an addition to existing Farley Center building. 8 of the 28 outpatient beds will be provided within the 2 existing Farley Center buildings, with the balance of the beds being provided within a new building. In addition to the number of beds, the applicant seeks to improve the campus by enclosing the outdoor dining terrace located off the Pavilion building in order to increase the size of the kitchen and dining facility. Create a new outdoor dining terrace off of the newly expanded kitchen and dining facility. Create a new courtyard off of the new wing at the Pavilion. Remove the existing roof structure from one of the existing covered porches. Enclose one existing covered porch. And adding a small expansion to the first floor and second story addition to the already approved wellness building to accommodate additional administrative offices, and providing the infrastructure associated with those improvements to the internal roadways, parking spaces, stormwater management, and internal underground utilities. The applicant's proposal meets the intent of the comprehensive plan guidance for the property, and even with the expansion, the property will have few impacts on the community, and any such impacts have been appropriately mitigated as confirmed by staff in the staff report and memorialized in the development conditions. For these reasons, and with staff's recommendation of approval, the applicant respectfully requests the county's support for the special use permit. I'm joined tonight by several members of the project team and representatives of Summit to help answer any questions you may have.
Do you have any questions for the applicant?
What does domiciliary
It's the equivalent of a dorm. And I'm not going to attempt to say the word because I trip over it every single time.
Else, Mr. Coleman?
I just wanted to follow up on the comment for the landscaping condition 4 to see if the applicant would be, have no objections to amending that by adding that extra sentence saying that the majority of trees, shrubs, or ornamental supplemental plantings would be native species to be done in accordance with the county code.
We have no objection to the change.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Do we have any speaker cards, Mr. Holt? Does anybody wish to speak? And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing and ask for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval for SUP 22-0018, 5477 Mooretown Road for the Williamsburg Place and Farley Pavilion,
And if we could,
with attached conditions.
as amended, with condition 4 as amended.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Holt, we have a motion.
Got it, believe it or not, I got it. I'm learning.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Crowe,
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Rose,
Aye.
Ms. Knoll,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers,
Aye.
and Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
The next item on our agenda is SUP 22-0021, 8401, Hicks Island Road Tourist Home. Ms. Costello.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Mr. Stuart Evans of Evans Construction has applied for a special use permit to allow for the short-term rental of a 4-bedroom, single-family home at 8401 Hicks Island Road. The property is zoned A1 General Agricultural Designated Rural Lands on the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map and is located outside the primary service area. The property is served by private well and private sewer. If granted, this SUP would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking that the applicant has stated, and the applicant has stated that he will obtain the proper licensing and inspections. Staff finds the proposed use will not negatively impact surrounding property or development, nor is it expected to negatively impact levels of service for roads and other public services. While staff believes the location is generally considered appropriate for this use, staff finds the proposal is not fully consistent with the adopted 2045 Comprehensive Plan recommendations for short-term rentals. Therefore, staff is unable to recommend approval of this application. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I am happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Costello? Mr. Haldeman?
Any comments from neighbors? Letters? No?
Can you provide more detail on why you find it not consistent?
It is not internal, or it's internal to a subdivision. It's not on the outside of a subdivision, and it's not on a major road.
Just to follow up, I did see reference to the fact that the property owner was going to reside in one of the structures on the parcels that is owned by the applicant. Is that correct?
There's 3 parcels that are owned by the applicant, and he resides on one of them. Not this one, but a neighboring parcel.
And that even if down the road there's some future short-term rentals, the applicant is still prepared to reside on one of the parcels?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
There were, pardon me, trees cleared within wetlands in the RPA?
Yes.
Is there mitigation for that, or what?
Stormwater is working with the applicant. They have the ordinance, so they're working on a plan, and I think the applicant is working towards mitigating all that.
And there was no building on the,
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, there was no building in the wetlands or,
I am not sure. Well, on this property, no.
Isn't there a dock and there's a road out, not a road, but a decking to go out to the dock that goes right through it?
It does go through the RPA, yes. And they'll have to remove that as part of the mitigation.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff, Barbara?
It said that Mr. Addix was going to live nearby, and when I pulled up his address, I got a Providence Forge address. So does he live on one of these adjacent properties, or
He
does he
lives
live in New
on
Canton?
the third one furthest down.
Which one?
It's the third property south. There's a property
Maybe I
right
would've
adjacent to it, and he's
Point
on
to it with the
the
mouse
property.
Just was curious.
and your
Okay, thank you.
cursor. Is your cursor
Oh.
show up? There you go.
He's on this property right here. Yep. Moving ahead of me. Right there. Up. He lives on this property right here.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff? Thank you very much. Does the applicant wish to speak? Please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. My name is Stuart Evans, as previously stated. I'm here in capacity as the owner's rep because of obviously the mitigation issues that have been called on some of the other parcels. And I'm here to answer questions as it relates to this parcel and this SUP specifically tonight, if you have any.
Questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any disclosures? Oh, I'm sorry, I want to open the public hearing, I didn't do that, sorry. And Mr. Steve Rogers, please.
I'm his closest neighbor.
Could you state your name and your address, please,
Oh,
sir?
Steve Rogers, 8408 Hicks Island Road.
Thank you.
And I'm his closest neighbor. And since he's purchased this property, he's done everything he could to improve everything. And it's been a lot of improvement done down there. I mean, just in general looks and everything. And I know he's been renting it out some, but I've never had any problem with anybody over there. And me and my wife, that's our vacation place, and we don't want to be around a whole bunch of noise or anything like that. And Chris, he don't want a bunch of noise around. So I mean, with just the people he's had there, it's just, you don't even know they're there. So I have no complaints whatsoever.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this item? If not, I will close the public comment and open the floor up for discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things about a special use permit is it conveys with the property in perpetuity. And so while the applicant could be an exemplary neighbor, landowner, and have high standards for short-term rentals, if that property was sold, that special use permit still conveys. And, we've been struggling with short-term rentals for a long time, for years, and finally came up with certain performance standards that we felt were essential to protect some of the neighbors. And this particular application doesn't meet two of them. One is that it's internal to a platted subdivision, and the other, it's not on a major road. And so for those reasons, even though the applicant is living and plans to live on one of the three parcels that he owns, I just feel that those two conditions and the fact that the SUP goes in perpetuity is such that I can't support the application tonight.
Coleman?
There's a third condition, I think, that isn't being met, and that is that the owner must live in the property. The purpose for that is obviously to control the tenants, the short-term tenants, and all three of the conditions are there to maintain the residential character of the neighborhood. And Mr. Kropf is right, we spent a lot of time on this. It's a complicated issue, but three of the four conditions aren't met here, so I won't be supporting it either.
Any other comments? Mr. Rose? No?
I think I take just a little different tact. It strikes me that unless I've read my materials wrong, but that the applicant owns the adjoining parcels. I realize he doesn't own the parcel to the north, but the property seems, and I have not driven out there, I've just looked at it online, but it seems remote in such a way to me that the general concerns I would normally have about noise for neighbors and interference with the way neighbors live seems self-mitigated by the fact that this is such a large piece of property. So I understand it's not on a main road. I don't think that's unusual for rural properties. So for me, I don't see the failure to meet the black letter of the recommendations to be quite as controlling. And so I would support this.
Comments? I would tell you that the thing that bothers me the most about this is that they state very explicitly that they intend to expand to the other two properties. So in fact, we're talking about a precedent that says if you approve this one, you're also essentially approving the other two. And I asked the question, and I guess the applicant will be able to tell me, if and when all three properties are rented, where will the owners reside? If all three of them, please, come up.
So it's the intent, you can't see it in this picture here, but there are other buildings that are further south in that view there. That lowest cabin that's there is not on the table to be rented. It's the other parts, there's other buildings that are planned south of that building is what the intent was. But honestly, at this point, the applicant is okay with this parcel. There are other issues that are going to be more tricky to get those approved in the other parcels. Ultimately, this is a standalone parcel and was purchased that way, and that's why the SUP was applied that way.
But it is fair to say that the applicant in their narrative did state their intent to replicate something that they saw down in Texas.
Yes, that was me.
And that's their intent, and they stated that. So I'm going to take that as a face value that at some point they intend to pursue that.
That is the goal, yes.
Okay. All right. You answered my question. So I'm back. Thank you very much. Unless there's anything else. So I'm back to my point is that it's just not this property. It's the other three or the other two. And so we're talking about back to the reasons the staff didn't support it and the comments that Mr. Holloman made is all you're doing is compounding the issue within that neighborhood, okay, for it. And so for that reason, both Mr. Crafts and Mr. Haldeman's, plus this notion that we're essentially setting a precedent for the other two. And to say yes now and then no to the other two, I'm sorry, I'd have a problem with that. So I don't intend to support this based on that. So do I have a motion? Or Ms. Null, you want to chime in?
No, I was just saying, rereading this thing for about the fifth time. Also, what bothers me is the complaint was filed with the stormwater resource. They've been using it as a rental when they're in violation of some of the things in the resource protection area determined by Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. So it's another thing of people doing things without the proper.
Any other discussion? Have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to deny SUP 22-0 22-0021 is Hicks Island Road Tourist Home.
Oh, we have a motion on the floor.
And just to clarify, a yes vote or an aye vote would be in support of the motion to recommend denial or to not recommend approval of this to the Board of Supervisors. Mr. Crop?
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
A.
And Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. And this will still be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors meeting for their consideration.
Okay, our last last agenda item is Z 22-0003, 8005, and 8009 Hankins Industrial Park Road. Ms. Costello, you're up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bruce Daniels of Daniels Welding and Tires has applied to rezone 2 parcels of land totaling approximately 3 acres from M2 General Industrial to M1 Limited Business Industrial. The properties are located at 8005 and 8009 Hankins Industrial Park Road. Both properties are designated general industry on the comprehensive plan land use map and are located inside the primary service area. The properties are served by public water and sewer. The proposal is to allow for vehicle repair and service with major repair limited to a fully enclosed building and screened from adjacent properties. The proposal is to allow for the continued use of 2 local businesses that perform vehicle repair and service. Vehicle service and repair is not a permitted nor a specially permitted use in the M2 zoning district. Staff finds this rezoning would not result in any anticipated negative impacts that would need to be mitigated. Staff finds the zoning consistent with the adopted 2045 comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and with surrounding zoning and development. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for staff? Thank you very much, Ms. Costello. Does the applicant wish to speak?
No, I have nothing to say.
Okay, so I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and look to the board for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say that I support this application. Mr. Daniels has been a businessman in the Upper County for probably 30 years or thereabouts, and this is totally consistent, in my opinion, with the surrounding zoning, and I will support this application. As a matter of fact, I'd like to make a motion for approval of this rezoning application.
We have
Mr. Crop?
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, so we are now on to Planning Commission considerations. Do we have anything? Okay, and now to the director's report.
How about that? Whole nother calendar year has gone by like that just again, and we've just wrapped up our last full commission meeting of 2022. So I think our next DRC meeting is canceled. We will have a policy committee meeting tomorrow. And beyond that, I don't have anything additional for tonight, but I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Holt? Okay, so moving on to Planning Commission discussions and requests. Any discussions or requests from planning commissioners? Okay, I've got the Board of Supervisors coverage for December with Mr. Kraft.
That is correct.
No considerations or requests, so I will like to hear a motion for adjournment.
Before we do, I would just like to wish my colleagues and staff a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday Season, Happy New Year, and anything else that's being celebrated in the next 30 days or so. So it's been a pleasure working with you all for this past year. Thank you all very
Same
much.
here.
Thank you very
Same
much.
here.
Richard.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned till 4th of January at 6 p.m. Thank you.